So, when you hear the name Einstein, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Is it the crazy hair, the equation E equals mc squared, or just the word genius? That image is, without a doubt, one of the most famous in the world. But behind that icon, there was a real person, a complex, brilliant, and often conflicted man. So, let's peel back the layers, right? Let's deconstruct the myth and try to find the real Albert Einstein.
This quote, it really gets to the heart of a huge conflict in his life. See, his own work helped kick off the quantum revolution, this whole new way of looking at physics that's all about probability and, well, uncertainty. But Einstein himself, he could never, ever accept that the universe was random at its core. It's this incredible tension between the chaotic world his own ideas helped reveal and the orderly, predictable cosmos he truly believed in that would really define the second half of his life.
To really get this revolution, we've got to rewind way back to 1905. Before he was a global celebrity, before the Nobel Prize, before any of it. He wasn't some big shot professor at a fancy university. No siree. He was a 26-year-old clerk at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern, just quietly looking over other people's inventions.
And from this, totally unassuming job, he just unleashed a firestorm of ideas that completely turned physics on its head. This period became known as his Annus Mirabilis, his miracle year. And you're about to see exactly why it earned that name.
I mean, the sheer amount of stuff he accomplished in 1905 is it's staggering. He published 4 papers. Think about it. One paper basically laid the foundation for all of quantum theory. That's the one he actually won the Nobel Prize for. Another one proved once and for all that atoms are real. Then, as if that wasn't enough, he introduced the world to special relativity, and with it, probably the most famous equation in history, E equals mc squared. Any one of those papers is a career-defining moment. He did all 4 in a single year. Just incredible.
And believe it or not, that miracle year, that was just the warm-up act. Special relativity was amazing, but it had a hole. It didn't include gravity. So for the next 10 years, Einstein threw himself into this massive intellectual wrestling match that would lead to his absolute masterpiece.
For hundreds of years, we all just went with Newton. Gravity was some kind of mysterious force pulling things together. But Einstein came along with this totally radical idea. He said there's no pull. Instead, imagine space and time as a giant stretchy trampoline. A heavy object, like the sun, creates a big dip in it. And planets like Earth, they aren't being pulled, they're just rolling along the curve created by that dip. They're following the straightest path they can through a curved universe.
There's this fantastic quote from the physicist John Archibald Wheeler that just sums it all up perfectly. It's this beautiful, dynamic dance. Matter tells space-time how to curve, and that curved space-time tells matter how to move. It's just an incredibly elegant and powerful idea.
But okay, a beautiful theory is one thing. Was it actually true? Einstein made this incredibly bold prediction. He said the sun's gravity is so strong it would actually bend the light from distant stars. And in 1919, an expedition led by Sir Arthur Eddington went out during a total solar eclipse to test it. And bam, he was right. The results were undeniable. The headlines went wild, shouting about a revolution in science. Overnight, the quiet patent clerk was gone. In his place was Einstein, the most famous scientist on Earth.
So his fame is just exploding, right? But at the same time, the world around him is getting a lot darker. The rise of Nazism in Germany, his home country, would force him into a completely new role, not just as a scientist, but as a public conscience, a prominent Jew, and very soon a refugee.
It all happened so fast in 1933. In January, Hitler came to power. By March, Einstein was visiting the US and knew he could never go back. He turned in his German passport. Just 2 months after that, his books, his ideas, were being thrown into bonfires in Berlin. By October of that same year, the man without a country had found a new home in Princeton, New Jersey.
So now he's in the United States, and he could have just hidden away in his office at Princeton, content to be a reclusive genius. But that just wasn't him. He saw his incredible fame as a platform, a responsibility, and he was absolutely determined to use it to speak out against the injustices he saw in his new country.
And he didn't just talk the talk, he really walked the walk. He joined the NAACP and campaigned tirelessly for civil rights, calling racism America's worst disease. You have to remember, having escaped anti-Semitism in Europe, he felt this deep connection to the struggle of African Americans. There's a famous story that when the incredible singer Marian Anderson was denied a hotel room in Princeton because she was black, Einstein immediately invited her to stay in his own home.
But this is where things get really complicated and honestly pretty heartbreaking for him. He was a lifelong pacifist who hated war. But in 1939, terrified that the Nazis were trying to build an atomic bomb, he signed a letter to President Roosevelt, urging the US to start its own program. That letter helped kickstart the Manhattan Project. It was a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life, and he would later call it the one great mistake he ever made.
So you might wonder, how did his new government feel about this world-famous scientist who was also a vocal activist? Well, this number, it tells you everything you need to know. By the time he died, the FBI had a secret file on Albert Einstein that was over 1,400 pages long. They were watching him closely.
So when we look back, how do we even begin to sum him up? Because his legacy is really two different stories, right? There's the scientist who changed our view of the universe, and then there's the cultural icon who became the face of genius. And funny enough, those two stories didn't always line up.
And this is where you see this really fascinating split. In his later years as a scientist, Einstein actually became kind of isolated. He spent decades chasing this unified field theory that never panned out, and he refused to accept the quantum mechanics that nearly every other physicist had embraced. But as his direct scientific influence started to fade, his cultural status as the ultimate genius just got bigger and bigger. His name and his face became the universal symbols for brilliance.
And his legacy is still with us today, in some pretty incredible and, yeah, kind of strange ways. There's an element on the periodic table named after him, Einsteinium. His actual brain was preserved and studied by scientists. He left all his papers and archives to the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And, to cap it all off, in 1999, Time magazine gave him a title that just feels right, Person of the Century.
Which brings us back to where we started, but with a new question. We all know that Einstein's genius changed the world. It completely reshaped how we see the universe. But his story also forces us to look at the other side of that equation. It shows us how the world, with all of its turmoil and its politics and its horrors, changed him. How it took a humble patent clerk and turned him into a global celebrity, a scientist into an activist, and in the end, a man into an unforgettable, complicated myth.